You seem hungry. Good thing your table is ready with Saturday Omaha.
Saturday Omaha.
Eat this.
Hey, this is Dave with Saturday Omaha. We are sitting in studio with a wonderful guest. Let's introduce her because that's the most important thing. Hi, Sarah Baker Hansen. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you? I feel like I'm a friend of Saturday.
You 100% are. There is no question that is indeed the case. Mm-hmm. And it's been a while. I was going to look up the last episode air date, but it doesn't matter because it's been far too long.
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. We had a great discussion getting to know you better. I bumped into you in various things and, of course, online, but it was great to get to know you and your history and with, the various things you've been writing for, growing up and trying all these desserts after practice in Omaha.
I remember that. We talked a lot about my history and my family and stuff growing up.
What is Sarah Baker Hansen doing these days besides eating awesome food?
So now I am a freelance writer for Flatwater Free Press. I have been writing food reviews for them every other week. They come out on flatwaterfreepress.org. I feel incredibly privileged to still have a journalism-focused outlet that wants to run food reviews in Omaha. So I was pretty excited to join their team. I also have written several kind of food, more like feature stories, but the reason that we decided to talk again was a story that I wrote in October that was more of a serious food story that I think we're going to talk about at length today, so we can get into that. But yeah, I'm with Flatwater Free Press. I still have my blog, sarahbakerhansen.com, and all my stories are there as well as on Flatwater. So yeah, it's great to be part of their team.
Fantastic. And yeah, you're exactly right. The story is what is the... I don't know, the thing, the genesis of why we are here talking today. And maybe we'll have to get back together in case you're going to run another bracket coming up this spring.
There's definitely going to be another bracket. And I have a big story, a kind of a series idea for 2025 that I'm actually having a meeting with soon with the Flatwater team. And I'm super excited about something new that I've never done before. So,
oh my goodness.
I know.
All right. Well, it's always exciting because the brackets have always been interesting too. So I'm curious to see what you come up with. So that's wonderful. How long have you been writing for Flatwater now?
That's a good question. I think for probably about the past year or so, maybe not quite a year. Yeah. But I started last year, got back into just sort of a new deadline, working with new people. And, I had been doing it since I left the World Herald. I started my blog and I kind of wrote independently there for a long time. But it's nice to have Flatwater, just because, they are independent, all free journalism. So all of my reviews are available on their site for absolutely free. They've debuted a new Thursday morning newsletter, and it's all Omaha focused. And so if you can subscribe to that on their website, and you'll get a preview of all the journalism they're doing about Omaha, as well as my food reviews every other Thursday. So it's pretty sweet. They're a great team. I'm just incredibly privileged to be working with them.
I mean, having your website out there is awesome, and then having this as well is just wonderful because your voice needs to be heard out there.
It's great. And, I think there are a lot of people talking and writing about food in Omaha. Mm-hmm. And, I just decided when I left the newspaper that I didn't want to stop. And I kind of just thought to myself, why do I have to? So I didn't. And I'm really glad I didn't. I'm really glad I stuck with it, through kind of COVID times, and just kept thinking about what do I want to write about and what's happening in Omaha. And since I've been with Flatwater, I think a lot of people that kind of lost track of me after I left the newspaper have kind of found me again. And so that feels really good. To just be more out and about. Like we ran into each other at a food event and just kind of be talking again to people about food and what's happening in Omaha.
You have a wealth of knowledge. You're very well traveled as well. You get outside of Omaha to try things.
Yeah,
so
I just got back from Europe. We were in France and Italy, and I got to check. If I had, I don't really have, I think, what you would call a bucket list, but I've always really wanted to go to Naples because pizza was invented in Naples, and so we went to Naples, and all we ate for all the days we were in Naples was just pizza and cappuccinos, and it was so incredible. And so I'm so excited to come back to Omaha and have yet another kind of experience of eating in a different place under my belt. Because I've always really felt like those experiences are like what color kind of what I end up having to say at my restaurant reviews. And we have so many different types of food in Omaha. It's a real pleasure to be able to to kind of go have those experiences and then bring those home and be able to understand a little deeper what our community of chefs is trying to do in certain cases.
I just had interviewed the chef from Spaccanapoli, who was born in Brazil to Italian parents, did the whole VPN thing in Italy, and then now he's making pizza in Omaha.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, it's incredible. I saw that, and I'm really, that was just a great story. So, yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's all right. So
let's get into it.
We kind of got the teaser right on the article.
Yeah.
So when we had talked last time around, your article that came out in October, right?
Yeah.
Was kind of about the kind of some of the struggles happening in the restaurant industry in Omaha right now.
So I had seen a lot, and I'm sure if you follow food or you're in the Omaha Food Lovers Facebook group or any of the various Facebook groups in Omaha that are about food, you have also seen what I saw, which was the rising price of food at restaurants. And, I had noticed it because I eat out a lot, that, something that used to cost $10 now costs $15. A craft cocktail that used to be $8 now costs $14. I just was noticing it. And so I was curious, sort of, just as a diner in some fashion, like what is happening and what is happening on the restaurant side that maybe the diner doesn't see. And so I decided to do some journalism.
And you did. And at our last juncture, not only do you have a background in journalism, and you have some specialization in being able to be an effective critic, and so you're telling me about those things. So I always learn something. So what did you find out? What's going on?
So the first person I decided to interview was Paul Urban. Block 16, I think, remains one of the most beloved and well-known restaurants in the city. And I had seen Paul posting a little bit about prices, and I had also seen him posting about how business had been slow. And so I called him, and we've done tons of interviews together, know him pretty well by this point, and we had a really candid conversation about what's been going on. And so I think that the top of my story, which I'll kind of talk about now, but if you read it, you'll see this again. But basically, for the first time in a long time, Paul, or maybe ever, Paul noticed that the lunch rush at Block 16 was slower. And he'd obviously noticed on the back end of things, prices were going up. So one day recently, he sat down and he did some math, and he added up the costs that it costs to make a block burger, right? And he realized that every time they sold a block burger at Block 16, and this was a little while ago, they were losing $1.24. And so he had to make this very tough call that he was going to raise the price. And so that, coupled with, my story has a lot of statistics about how, like, restaurant traffic is down, and visits to casual dining restaurants are down, and diners are also paying some of the highest food prices in memory. That kind of puts a restaurant owner into a real conundrum. So we wanted to kind of figure out, like, okay, what does this block burger look like? Like, what's the trajectory that the block burger has taken over the past few years? So the original price of a Block 16 block burger was $8.95.
Okay.
And then in April 2022, the food costs, which he described to me, kind of basically forced him to raise the price of that burger to $12.95.
Wow, that's a big jump.
It's, another $4, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and I think, he did not want to do that at all. And so he ended up raising prices of a lot of things. And a diner sees that, and they don't really have the background that they don't have the same conversation with the owner of the restaurant, or they're not asking anybody who, that they encounter who probably knows, like, what those costs look like. And so I think sometimes, people do comment, like, about higher prices. And so I really wanted to write a story that would maybe help people have a little bit more understanding of exactly why this is happening. And so I talked to an economist. I talked to Brett Geiger, who runs Izzy's Pizza.
Oh, yeah.
We talked a little bit about how even after his restaurant was on diners, drive-ins, and dives, business was still slow. He's very candid on his social media page if you follow him. And, he thinks people think that, that they have a line out the door because they were on television, and that's just not the reality for a lot of restaurants. And I can't speak to, other restaurants that are closing, because restaurants close for a lot of different reasons. And if there's one thing I can tell you definitively after writing about restaurants for more than a decade, that I think it is the toughest business you can choose to be in. It's late nights, it's long hours, it's dealing with the public every single day, rising costs, trying to make your business numbers work. There's just tons and tons of stress related to it. And so, but we have seen, nonetheless, a lot of restaurants recently that have decided to close.
It's been really rough over the last couple of weeks and months.
Yeah. And I do think it goes in cycles. Like, I remember there have been other times in the time I've been writing about food where it has felt like, wow, a lot of restaurants are closing. And I think there's a lot of reasons that restaurants close, but I do think that this story, I think, is evidence of one big reason that a lot of restaurants are closing.
Something happened within the last year or so, at least, where I look at my receipt and I'm like, geez, I'm dropping a 20 spot every time for lunch. It doesn't matter where I go, especially, and like you said, the industry being so tough, the margins are so thin. You start thinking about things like, to-go flatware and plates and napkins and all the little, people taking, 78 packages of ketchup, or, all those things add up. Mm-hmm. And how are you, doing things? I saw Block 16 they went back to fountain soda. Now that we're talking about it, I didn't even put that together. I wonder if that was also a cost move.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Right.
But so many different things, and labor, is hard. The turnover rate in the restaurant industry, I want to tell you, I think it's like 80% per year or something like that.
Labor is another big part of it.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that I found in this story is, so I remember, and I'm sure you remember this too, like when there were a lot of restaurants that have closed, a while ago, not recently, but there was that big farm to table moment in restaurants in Omaha, and everyone had a chalkboard and it was listing out all, the local purveyors that they work with. And so I wanted to get for my story the perspective of a local producer. So I called Logan Barr, who runs Plum Creek Farms, and he told me that in the post-COVID world, his business model has basically taken a 180-degree turn entirely. So the bulk of their business, 70% of their business, was restaurants, selling whole birds to restaurants and chefs. And now he sells primarily to grocery stores, small local butchers, and home cooks who love his product and just want to cook with it at home. And basically, a lot of the restaurants like I said, that bought his chicken have gone out of business. But the biggest reason that restaurants don't buy his whole birds anymore is because they don't have the staff who knows how to break down the whole birds, and they also don't have the menu that allows them to use every part of that bird. So the cost that it takes to buy that and to break it down and to then use it fully on your menu, it just doesn't happen anymore. And Block 16, Paul told me that he still does buy chicken thighs from Logan and Plum Creek Farms that they use on their chicken sandwiches. But he said he basically can't afford to buy a lot of their other products because it would just be simply too expensive to serve on the consumer side. And this isn't in my story, but one of the things also that I really noticed, or that Paul told me, is that, they've kind of moved away. If you remember, Block 16 on like Friday and Saturday night used to serve kind of like more high-end plated meals, and they've really gone away from that. They've moved much more towards sandwiches or things that aren't going to be as expensive. And I think that's kind of a bummer. I mean, I'm glad they're still open on weekends, but I really used to enjoy the moments when Paul and Jessica, both trained in fine dining, both incredible chefs, would really get that chance to flex their muscles a little bit, like show the diner what they were capable of. And the moment that we're currently living in just doesn't really allow them to do that.
Yeah, especially because the east side of the restaurant, the larger room there, at night when it's just lit up with those long kind of communal tables and things like that, it's a great environment for something like that.
Yeah, I know. I miss that. And I'm sure there are a lot of other diners out there too. And I didn't really put the pieces together until Paul said that to me. Like, I'm always looking at their specials every day, every morning. They're like one of the first people that pop up on my Facebook feed, probably because I always like their posts. But yeah, I thought that's a little bit of a bummer for the Omaha restaurant scene. And I'm sure that that's not the only situation where that's happening.
Yeah, so many restaurants that have closed. I know some of them. And what I don't like to see on social media either is I've seen somewhere it's like, oh, well, your location was bad. Well, real estate is very expensive.
Yes. And
the part that kills me in Omaha is, we've got this saying, locals know, right? You can get anywhere in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That's usually pretty accurate, A. B, I'm pretty sure if you're on the west side of town, I bet you go to the zoo every once in a while.
Yeah.
And I bet if you're on this side of town, where we're downtown recording right now, I bet you go out to West Omaha for something. If the food's good, just go get it.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, just go find it.
I mean, I drive anywhere and everywhere.
Yes.
I have no boundaries of where I will go for food. I went to Naples for food. So, yeah, I mean, I there's never a restaurant that it's never crossed my mind that a restaurant was too far away. That's just me. And also, part of my job as a food writer is to write about the diversity of restaurants in Omaha. And that means going to a lot of different neighborhoods. And one of the things that I think is really interesting in the past year or so, we've seen restaurants opening in like Fremont, fine dining, and Waterloo, fine dining, and Ashland, and these different places. And I think that's really fascinating. And I did go out to Waterloo and dined at Salted Edge and reviewed it for the Flatwater Free Press and really enjoyed it, and have been back several times since. And I live on 10th and Dodge, for context. So I'm not sure there's a restaurant I could drive to that is farther away from where I live than Salted Edge. Maybe Lincoln.
That's
but in the
fair.
Omaha metro area. So yeah, that argument doesn't really jive with me.
Yeah. In fact, I just drove out a couple weeks ago to Corning, Iowa to go to Primrose, Joel Marsh spot out there. So.
Yeah, and I've been out to Semo and Fremont, which was fantastic, and so many people I know are supporting that. So yeah, I mean, I do think there's still in Omaha an audience for new and interesting and maybe most importantly, locally owned restaurants. And that's mostly what I write about. Very rarely will I write about a chain restaurant unless it's something that a lot of people are asking me about or really want to see, and that doesn't happen very often. So
that's fair. Well, yeah, and you're putting the spotlight on a unique spot or a cuisine that's maybe only available in one spot in Omaha. I've brought up the Burmese tea leaf salad many times on this show, just because there's only one spot to get it. There's a Burmese restaurant in North Omaha.
Yeah.
And so, finding those places. And the other thing with Omaha is there isn't like just a central hub of all the restaurants are here.
Right.
We do have various areas. You have Blackstone and downtown and Little Bohemia and things like that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you have to go just a little off the beaten path, maybe to find that hidden gem.
Yeah. Oh, I think so for sure. And I think that's part of what makes it fun, right?
Yes.
Like going to a different neighborhood, being in a part of town that you don't always get to. I mean, I think the main street of Fremont, like I can see why Sebo opened there. It's a great spot. Like it's so cozy and quaint and cute. Like it makes total sense to me. Historic building, probably the rent's a lot lower.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of reasons of why something like that works. But, I mean, I love to go over to South Omaha. Just last week we went and had dinner at Johnny's and sat in the bar, and it's just kind of like, oh man, it's so cool. We're at an 102-year-old steakhouse in the heart of the Omaha stockyards. Like, what's not to like, know?
Yeah,
so,
no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. And I was at Laos Thai off of 24th.
Yeah, which I heard is maybe under new ownership.
Yeah, so I'm going to say new within the span of maybe a year or two.
Yeah.
So Chinapat that owns Plateau Thai in Millard.
Oh, right, yeah.
It's her sister.
That's cool.
And what's kind of neat is the focus on Laos Thai is more the street food version. Mm-hmm. So your pad thai may look a little different than what you might expect in the restaurant. So it's kind of neat. So they kind of have two different perspectives on things. But good stuff.
That's great. Yeah. I love that. I mean, even that we can have two totally different like Thai experiences in Omaha. I think about how we're getting, Indian restaurants in Omaha used to be kind of all very similar. And now Canara is like blowing that out of the water and introducing all of us to a completely new style and flavor of Indian food. And so my story about restaurant prices did end on a higher note because the price of beef had gone down in the past few weeks, and Paul was actually able to lower the price of a block burger by $1. So now it's $11.95. And so, there was like a sliver of hope at the end of that story.
Yes.
That maybe things will even out a little bit and prices will regulate and it'll be a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But I still think it's going to be tough. And I think, even today, there was an announcement of a restaurant that's closing that I saw just before I got here that we were just talking about.
The universe just popped that on there. And I guess I'm going to say in a bad way, I guess. But we had arranged to meet this evening.
Yeah.
Here it comes on social media. Modern Love is not renewing their lease. Now they're going to be there till summer of 2025 is what I read.
Yes.
Another place that's been on diners, drive-ins, and dives.
Yeah.
And one of the few vegan-focused locations in Omaha. That had to hit pretty hard there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it does hit hard. I think, people were already sending me messages about it before I got here this afternoon. I think Modern Love was always to me, it was always kind of a feather in Omaha's cap. Like Isa Chandra Moskowitz, the owner of Modern Love, who's a very well-known and successful cookbook author, opened in Omaha and then opened in Brooklyn.
That's awesome.
And that's just kind of like one of my favorite facts about Modern Love. Like, it started here.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a bummer to see that it's closing next summer. The Post did say that they're hoping to find another smaller location to reopen. So I really hope that happens and that it isn't really the end of it.
Yeah, me too. And I saw that Taste of India moved. They're in Leavenworth and they're going to the Blackstone.
Yeah.
I am hopeful that works out great for them. I'm hoping they still have a drive-through window because I really like that. That was nice because curry travels fantastically.
It sure does.
But we had a little barbecue spot in Bellevue just closed recently as well. And the list of places. So if a person that's listening to the sound of my voice is out there and you're like, man, I haven't really gone to this place that I really, really love in a long time.
Yeah.
You got to make sure you go every once in a while because they need you and they need you more than ever right now.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things is a lot of the comments that I was seeing online were, people were saying, we'd love to eat out, but we can't afford it.
Sure.
And that, that was what I kind of asked the economist I interviewed for the story, who is a Creighton University economics professor named Ernie Goss. And he basically, he really wanted to reiterate that restaurants aren't raising prices to make more money. They're actually raising prices in order to stay in business. This isn't price gouging. They're not trying to rip you off. They're trying to make their numbers work. And I think that example of the block burger really put it into stark reality for me when I was working on the story. I was like, okay, this is something that most people who are reading this story have probably eaten. And so it's not a, fine dining thing. It's not a, caviar. It's not a really expensive thing. It's a burger, right? So it kind of really brings it into reality that those changes are simply just to stay open.
Yeah, the burgers aren't listed on the menu at market price, right? They're just they're there.
No, it's not lobster.
Yeah, and I've seen other posts from restaurants, that apologizing when they have to raise menu prices because they're like because I'm sure the regulars come in and like, well, wait a minute, it was 15 last week. Why is it 17 this week? And people are feeling that pinch, and you can just tell in their heart they're like, I'm sorry, but I need to keep the doors open.
Right.
You can only do so much.
And it was pretty interesting. While I'd interviewed Brett from Izzy's Pizza, and I was working on my story, and a couple weeks passed, and I actually didn't get it done before we went to Europe. So we went to Europe, and then I finished it when we got home. And during that time, he made the announcement on social media that he was pulling out of a planned West Omaha location that they were going to open. And one of the things that he said to me was that he was looking to expand the menu for this new location, and he was looking at chicken wings. And he said the cost was much higher than he anticipated. And that he would have had to charge $30 for a pound of chicken wings in order for it to work. And he just is that's just, people are going to think that's ridiculous. He basically said he doesn't think the public is educated in how that works. And so most people come in and they see a price like that and they're just they're flabbergasted. But, he's running the numbers. He's making the product, accounting for his own time and the cost of running a business. And I think it is eye-opening. It was eye-opening for me a little bit. Like, I knew it was happening, but I did not have that background context. And so, the power of journalism.
Right.
Ask some questions. Write a story.
Write a story. You get to learn, then you get to help everyone else learn.
Yeah, a very different type of story for me, actually. I've written these types of stories in the past. During COVID, I wrote a story about restaurants closing in Dundee. Like, it felt like Dundee was getting really hard hit at that time because so many places closed. And I did some interviews around that. And I wrote a story about economics, but it had been a while. And it's a totally different type of writing for me. So yeah, it kind of feels good sometimes to remember that it doesn't just have to be my opinion. Sometimes I can report a story.
Yeah. You're not focusing on the ingredients or, was this a balanced dish
this
or plating?
Experience or any of that.
Yeah.
I'm glad I wrote it, and I certainly learned a lot. And I think, as I continue to dine out, it just, I think about kind of what things cost. And I have a deeper understanding now of why that's what they cost.
Yeah.
And I sure want those businesses to be able to stay in business.
Yeah. And the whole thing is it's a service and hospitality industry. They want to see a smile on their customer's face. Mm-hmm. They want you to come back week after week.
Yeah.
They don't want to charge you $1 billion for
right.
whatever. It's like, okay, how much do I need to charge for this so that I can make a living, support my family, my staff, but also at a price that somebody's actually going to walk in the door and think is okay. And like you said with Brett's quote about the
wings,
the $30 for a pound of wings or whatever, and people are going to go, what?
Yeah. I mean, last year you mentioned the bracket at the top of the show, and the last year the bracket was about buffalo wings or chicken wings more broadly. And I remember when I was working on the reviews around that, I went to Everett's, and Everett's, great little kind of, I don't know, neighborhood bar and grill, I guess I would call it.
Agreed.
Really like it. Fantastic food. And when I interviewed them afterward to write my story, I was blown away by the amount of time and energy and care that they were putting into that product. And at the end of the day, like, that's what made the product so good. Was it more expensive than some of the other wings I tried? 100%. But the wings are hand sorted by size. They soak overnight in a brine. Then every single sauce that you have on those wings is completely homemade.
Wow.
So think about the time just that it would take for somebody to hand sort chicken wings by size. Like, that alone is like kind of a thing that I think most consumers don't think about. And that's really, I think, a sign of a restaurant that really cares about what its product is like. And I think all the restaurant owners that I interviewed for the story that I wrote, they feel that same way. They care about it. They want it to be the best thing it can be. And that means time and labor and product and effort. And, they're cooking for you. So at the end of the day, we do have to pay for that.
Right. And I've seen some barbecue places too sometimes. I mean, my gosh, wings and like brisket for a while.
Oh my gosh. Barbecue is one of the most labor intensive foods you can cook. Like, if you go down to Kansas City and you look at the prices of barbecue, you're like, wow, this is expensive. But also it is so labor intensive, and it takes a certain amount of talent to be able to do that. In the way that so many barbecue places have become so famous for.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm willing to pay the price for it, again, because I just feel like it's worth it.
Well, yeah, because they're staying up overnight and checking on things all the time or whatever. And then I've seen posts where something that came in from the suppliers were to kind of talking about the quality of ingredients, like at Everett's, where they're really paying attention to those details. And like for a while, I can't remember which restaurant it was, they were like, hey, the ribs that we're getting in lately aren't up to our standards.
Yeah.
So we're just not going to serve them.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great move that illustrates the caring that you're talking about there. And you were mentioning the from scratch sauces, which drew my mind down to Kitchen Table downtown, where like even the ketchup is down to, is scratch. And they're battling street closures, like for Kitchen Table and Blackstone, both right at the moment. There's so much going on. So you've got all the cost things, staffing things, and then it's like, oh, and by the way, no one can park out front.
And I think your ribs example too is a good example of, these aren't up to our standard. We aren't going to serve them, but they still had to pay for those. right?
Right.
So at that point, they're basically going to just eat the cost of whatever those were because they weren't up to their standards unless they can work out. I don't know how that would work. But when you think about it, they're going to lose money on that deal. But also, if they serve those, they're going to lose customers. I think there's always this kind of intense balance when you're running a restaurant of, just so many different factors. And this is coming from me. I've been a food critic for a decade, right? So I've definitely, criticized restaurants before and will in the future. But, I hope that what can come of that sometimes is constructive.
Sure.
And that maybe there's a different type of value there.
Kevin Shin, who is running the Portico at Bread and Cup in Lincoln. Longtime listeners probably heard me repeat this way too many times, but I'll do it again, darn it. But we were talking about, criticizing food and whatnot, and, make sure it's what's your preference versus was it a preparation issue?
Right.
And so, like you said, that constructive criticism, I think restaurant owners want to hear that, and they want to hear it directly too. I think that's the other thing too, is I think sometimes folks will get on social media and just start ripping a restaurant up one side and down the other.
Yeah.
But they never even talk to the manager or the owner to see if they'd make it right for them. And I think that's important. You need to talk to your server, talk to your manager, talk to those folks.
I've had plenty of uncomfortable conversations over the years, if you can believe it or not.
What?
Yeah. So, I think most of the time you're right. People they are willing to have that conversation. So.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and absolutely. And because everybody wants to get better and they want that best product out there.
Yeah. I think, every chef I've ever encountered or talked to has always, cared about all the things that we're talking about today. And I think, those kind of unseen things sometimes I think are what the public just doesn't think about.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes it's nice to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and say, this is actually what's happening and this is how tough it is right now.
The other thing is that not only is the chef hat a hat that they are wearing, but that same day, they might have been a plumber, the IT cash register, toast, square, whatever, terminal technician, handling, receiving of product. My goodness, I bet, Paul, if we called them up and be like, hey, would you just, you just want to cook one day? He'd be like, what? Instead of doing all these other things, so, and they're just, you said it. It's such a hard business to be in. Just because of all of those aspects, and to run that, it's not like most of these places, they don't have a big corporation behind them funneling money, right?
No.
They drive up in their own car, they park there, they unlock the door themselves, and then it's open to close and before open and after close, handling all of that
100%.
stuff.
Yeah. And, I always think it's funny. I mean, we're talking a lot about Block 16, but one of the most, I don't know, recurring comments that I see on Block 16's page is, will you guys open a West Omaha location?
Oh, yes.
And I think to myself, okay, this is the answer in part to why they don't open a West Omaha location. Because look at what it takes to keep their existing location open.
True.
And I mean, I've always been amazed by the chefs and chef owners who can manage 2 locations of a restaurant. We've seen examples where it's worked amazingly well, and we've seen examples in the history of restaurants in the city where it has not worked. And so, I think it can always go either way. But the challenge of that is that, Paul Urban is not going to be able to clone himself.
That's
to
true.
Be in downtown and West Omaha at the same time. And so, I've talked to chefs over the years about just the challenges of that. Like, you have to have a team that runs so well together that you trust them impeccably with every responsibility, because you're not going to be able to be there. And so, I think sometimes I think it's important for people to understand really that this is a business. At the end of the day, it's a business. And you have to make some tough decisions related to keeping your doors open.
No doubt. whether that's raising prices, maybe something isn't on the menu because it's just not cost effective for anybody.
Or not up to your standards.
Right.
Like your example, or, you've got to have staff in order to work all the different areas of the restaurant. If somebody's not there, that means another person has to cover. I mean, there are just a lot of different things, a lot of different challenges that you can encounter on a every single day type of basis.
Absolutely.
I mean, the reason I've always liked journalism or being a food writer is because it feels like I get to do something different all the time. And I appreciate that. And I like that my work isn't like pushing the same button every day. But like at the restaurant, I think in the restaurant industry, you could times that by like 1,000 because every day is going to be different. So dramatically different, I mean, we've probably all of us have watched The Bear, and I think there's some reality to that.
Yeah. In fact, that's one of those things when a lot of people, I talk to or whatever, like, have you seen The Bear? And it's like, that's pretty real. There's still some things for drama in there, obviously. But
I remember reading something after the first season came out that restaurant, like people who had worked in the industry couldn't watch it because it was giving them like PTSD, or they were having like anxiety attacks because they were just like, this is supposed to be like an enjoyable show, not a reminder of like, how awful this can sometimes be.
I don't want to go to work by watching TV when I get home.
Yeah, for real. Yeah. So anyway.
Man. Well, and then we're, my goodness, we touched on like turnover rates and things like that because some people aren't in the restaurant industry for a career or they bounce between places. In addition to that, there's some substance abuse challenges sometimes in the industry. And I had talked to Kirsten Ipok-Philbin at the Omaha Service Industry Circle at the time when I had talked to her. And it was a support organization because handling things like what happens if you have no insurance? What happens if you get a DUI? What does that mean? So you have all the people aspects, the financial aspects, and all of those things. And what if somebody doesn't come in? Well, you can't have a huge staff. You're a small business that just says, oh, okay, my saute cook is not on the line today. Somebody else has to do that. But there might only be one person for each of those positions because that's all that you can afford. Yeah,
or all that you can find. I mean, there's labor shortages and subsequent wage increases that restaurant owners are fighting. That's part of the price increases that customers pay. Some restaurants have turned to like automated checkout or self-service checkout, and now people are starting to say, oh, this is like bad customer service. You don't have enough employees. Like, why do I have to check myself out? So now that those are being taken away, like I heard a story the other week about how the local Hy-Vee stores are taking out the self-checkouts.
Oh.
And we're going back to the way it was before. But then, you have to hire a person to actually work there. And so it's just a big change in how like everyone eats and everyone shops and what everyone's kind of expectations are. And are we going to go back to how it was before? The economists that I interviewed said maybe not.
We've been talking a lot about the restaurant side too, and then from the consumer side, I think you had some stats in your article about people eating out a little bit less, as well as down 4% or something along those lines, just in general.
Let me find that. So sales traffic at U.S. restaurants was down by 3.3% this year through the beginning of October when compared to 2023. And then casual dining restaurants during that same period fell 4.5%.
Wow.
And then to do the comparison compared to 4 years ago, grocery prices are up 20%.
Wow.
And so that sort of food prices also affects restaurants, right? So not only are you paying more at the grocery store, you're also paying more if you dine out. And a lot of people just kind of can't afford to do both of those things. And so when people say on social media, like, oh, I can't afford to go out, well, groceries are 20% more than they used to be. And so that's a big reason of why. If you've got a family, maybe you can't afford to do that anymore. And there's some people who are still kind of making enough money to be able to dine out. And those people, according to the economists that I interviewed, are the ones who are likely still supporting like the fine dining restaurants, like the higher end restaurants. So we haven't really seen the same narrative from like the higher end restaurants. It's more of kind of the middle, fast casual, lower priced places who are really feeling the pinch.
I'm sure there's domino effects here too, because if the restaurant isn't doing as many covers, isn't servicing as many tables, there's not as much income for the restaurant. I'd be curious to see how tipping is, if it is changing at all with the changes in prices and things like that. If people are tipping less, which then the server then has less, so they might not be dining out. I'd be curious about that. I don't have any stats on that.
Yeah, I don't have any stats on tipping. I didn't really do any interviews on that in particular. I could definitely go back and look at that. But, I think tipping is interesting because, like I said, I was just in Europe. And
no tipping.
It's very different there. I mean, a service charge is part of your bill. So you can choose to leave a tip on top of it. And I remember we got to Paris and Matthew was like, there's no line for a tip. And I was like, I don't think you have to leave one. And he was like, I feel like a jerk.
That's in our culture in the U.S.
It's just kind of like something that we're so accustomed to doing.
Yeah.
And they build whatever service fee that you pay into your bill. And so it's not an option, right? You're just paying it, whatever it is.
It's just built in.
Yeah. And so it doesn't really have the same feel to it that it does here. But, it's interesting because as part of the conversation that I had with Ernie Goss about labor, he was saying that hourly pay for restaurant workers is now often significantly above the federal minimum wage. And so that also affects prices and what you pay for the food, because the labor shortage and subsequent wage increases after COVID has really affected kind of what restaurants pay their employees.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because that was one of those things that coming out of COVID, I think there was a different lens put on the restaurant industry where folks started to look at it and like, wait, most of us don't have health care.
Right.
We're not getting paid a ton. Sometimes the environment in the kitchen is brutal.
Right.
It's physically stressful. It's emotionally stressful. I know we talked a lot about food costs, but maybe there's a little bit of tuning in the industry, making it better so that it's more a desirable career, but also that folks are maybe getting compensated better, and an increase on mental health and physical health. Because I've heard stories about people going to work, and if you're feeling bad, you go back and you throw up in the trash can, and then you come back out.
Right.
And that's brutal, and nobody should have to deal with that.
I haven't done any official interviews about this exact topic, but colloquially, just talking to people who are in the restaurant and also the beverage industry. One restaurant owner that I know talked about how they were really proud that they were able to retain their staff through COVID. And it was because they paid more and they offered health insurance. And it was the first time that even this restaurant owner had ever had health insurance.
Wow.
And so, think about that. I think you're absolutely right that there's been a big change there was a mass exodus of people who left the restaurant industry. Yeah. And they went and got all kinds of different other jobs. And in the story I wrote about restaurants closing during COVID time in Dundee, that was one of the narratives of that story. Kind of, there are no restaurant workers, and so many people are leaving. Like, it's hard to stay open because we don't have anyone who wants to work in this business, especially during this time, because restaurants, were struggling. Really struggling to keep their doors open and having to change their entire business model in a lot of cases. I think after that, we have seen a lot more restaurants who are offering health insurance, who are, offering shorter shifts, pay is higher. All of those things on paper seem good, and they are good. And we want people to have mental health and health care and a job that doesn't, destroy their soul. But on the other side, the flip side of that, all that costs money. That's going to have to come around somewhere else.
That balancing act, and then, again, focusing on those food prices. And it's like all of a sudden your distributor tells you, oh, this is going to cost, 30% more than it did last time. You're like,
right.
What?
Yeah. So it isn't just as simple as saying restaurants want to make more money.
Right.
There's a lot more to it than that. And I hope that people can find a little bit more understanding for how tough it is out there. And we do see all these restaurants posting about how they're closing. We do need to try to support the ones when we can, if we can afford it, because I think it's a tough business has gotten even tougher.
Well said. Let's talk about positive things.
Okay.
Let's talk about positive things.
That sounds great.
What is coming on the horizon for Sarah Baker Hansen? And are there also any spots that you have eaten at lately that were just awesome?
Well, I remain incredibly excited about Dumpling Empire. Should we talk about Dumpling
Let's
Empire?
talk about it because
Okay.
I haven't made it over
Oh
there
my
yet.
gosh.
I know.
Oh my gosh. Sorry to yell into the microphone.
That is okay. I think your exclaim was appropriate because I haven't been there. I've seen pictures of wonderfully, beautifully different colored dumplings and things like that. They're in the old pizza spot that was over there on
Yes.
Ralston on 72nd. So
Really random
do tell.
location.
Yeah.
I reviewed Dumpling Empire in September, so a little while ago. I have been waiting for, well, it's in my story, 12 years for soup dumplings to come to Omaha. I went to China, to Shanghai and Beijing on a trip 12 years ago, and I remember first eating what's called xiaolong bao, which is a soup dumpling. And we ordered them. It was a version of it. It wasn't exactly what they have at Dumpling Empire, but it's close. And I just, that like magical moment of first having this absolutely incredible food that not only did I not even know how to pronounce, I had never seen before. I had no idea it existed. This is why travel is so important to food writing in my mind. Like the tricolor steam buns at Dumpling Empire are just absolutely fantastic. And I was so stoked after my review came out because I got so many notes and comments from people who were like, number one, as excited as I was that these had come to Omaha, and number two, never heard of them.
Nice.
And so that's one of my favorite things about food in Omaha is that, like you were saying earlier, there's always like a new experience to be had. There's always a new restaurant to try. And in some cases, there's a food that literally no restaurant has ever served in the city of Omaha, to my knowledge, ever. And now we have it. And that is really friggin' cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's when we had the spot that was doing the Rogamo in Interrail. They are sadly not there anymore. I had never seen one of those sandwiches before, and I was like, "What is this?" And it's awesome.
Yeah. So a soup dumpling. Some people wanted me to kind of like describe what it was, including my editor. So a soup dumpling needs to be eaten in a certain way. So if you haven't had one before, it's filled with like boiling hot liquid. So how it's made is there's like a pork meatball that gets put inside of like a hand-rolled dumpling wrapper, and then it gets steamed. And while it's getting steamed, the liquid comes out of the meatball and fills up the inside of the soup dumpling, right? So you basically, what you have to do is, if you have chopsticks and a soup spoon, that's what you're going to get. You put the dumpling in the soup spoon, and then you very carefully bite a small hole into the side of the soup dumpling, and you let some of that steam escape so you don't just absolutely incinerate the inside of your mouth with like the hottest broth ever. And then you kind of slurp the broth out of the dumpling, and then you eat the rest of the dumpling. It's so good.
Okay. All right. 10 out of 10.
Yeah,
We'll try those.
you have to try it.
Okay.
But the other thing that's really cool about Dumpling Empire is they also have these hand-pulled chili oil noodles.
Ooh.
Yeah, and so they're making the dumplings all by hand. And they're also hand pulling noodles, which is something that is also kind of labor intensive, and you don't see that very often. But these noodles are so good, and they're sort of like twirled around like bok choy and chili peppers, and the broth is like, on a cold day, this would be sort of similar to like eating a really hot bowl of pho. Like
nice.
The most comforting and delicious food. It's like, ginger, scallion, garlic, soy, like all of those amazing flavors in this bowl of noodles. And I know it sounds kind of like chili oil is a little intimidating, but it's spicy, but it's not like going to burn your face off. Like it's measured in its spice. And so, highly recommend getting a bowl of those while you're there.
Do you get to see them pull the noodles?
Yeah. So they have, when you walk in, they have kind of a big open kitchen.
Yeah.
And you can see them pulling noodles and rolling dumpling wrappers by hand.
Now, do they do that move where they like stretch it out like 6 feet and then slap it on the table?
I didn't see them doing that.
Okay.
But I'm
sorry
sorry to inform you that I didn't get to see that. Maybe
anyway.
they do and I just didn't see it. But these were more kind of like hand cut noodles.
Okay.
So I've actually had those slapping
Have you?
noodles
Oh,
before.
that's awesome.
Yeah. There was a restaurant in Shanghai that we went to where there was a guy behind a window like doing that.
That's
and then like
cool.
those went into our bowl and like we ate them and it was glorious.
I bet.
Yeah. So, but these are really good. They also have cold sesame noodles. They have kind of some Japanese like street food dishes like takoyaki, which is a really fun thing to eat. So I don't know. I feel like if you want to have an experience that I had never had in Omaha before, put Dumpling Empire on your list because if you're feeling adventurous, it's really the only place in Omaha right now that you can get this particular experience.
That is super solid.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so obviously I have to go there.
You have to go. I can't believe you haven't been.
I know, and I've had other people like, "Hey, I went to Dumpling Empire. Have you gone yet?" I'm like, "No, I haven't gone." And
Yeah, it's great.
Dumplings and any type of dumpling or pocket sandwich is always good. I mean,
Totally.
it just is.
Yeah.
Is.
100%.
Do you have any stories in the works on Flatwater for SarahBakerHansen.com? What's coming up?
I have a review coming up next week.
Ooh.
Won't be able to tell you what that's about quite yet. Haven't contacted them yet.
Oh, fair enough. All right. Well, good news. By the time
Yeah.
this airs, the folks won't have to wait long to read it. So that's good.
Every other Thursday. So
Perfect.
Next Thursday. And then, like I said at the beginning of the show, I have a project that I'm hoping to work on in 2025, and we're kind of in the process of negotiating a few things around that. So I can't reveal what it is quite yet, but I'm very excited about it, and I can say that it will involve Omaha, Lincoln, and the rest of Nebraska.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not the bracket. The bracket will still happen.
Oh,
and
so
we actually
this and
is
the
a
bracket.
separate. This is just a Flatwater project that I'm really, really excited about. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of research and planning and proposal writing and all kinds of things for this project. And then the bracket, of course, that will be back in March. And I think we've narrowed it down to, I think we have 2 ideas. And one would be similar to what we've done before, like all the 4 regions would be the same item. And the other one would be a little bit different in that it would be the same. I don't exactly know how to describe this, but it would be the same item, but the 4 brackets would be different.
Oh.
And so it would be sort of like, this isn't what it is, but like, potentially like a hot dog could go up against a hamburger. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
Like it would be
okay.
4 regions and things would move up into that region. But then as you got into the end, like different things would be facing off in the final rounds, and we would see which one of these items reigns supreme.
All I hear out of that is drama, intrigue, tension, and food.
Many, many votes.
Yes. Oh my goodness, that is fantastic.
So we don't have those details worked out quite yet, but 2025 is going to be very busy.
Love it.
Super excited. Looking forward to potentially getting back out on the road and traveling to some restaurants around the state, which I used to get to do fairly regularly and haven't been able to do in quite a few years. So that would be really fun.
I mean, but you did make it to Naples.
I did make it to Naples. That I took vacation for that. I don't know if I could take vacation from my day job for this, but maybe.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Well,
a lot of weekend road warrior action happening in 2025.
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, you are always up to something awesome. So the last question I will
Okay.
ask you: what are all the places that people should be finding out what Sarah Baker Hansen is doing these days?
Yeah, so you can find me on flatwaterfreepress.org. There's all my food reviews run there, and then the next day, so they run on Flatwater Thursday, and then the next day, Friday, they appear on my website, which is sarahbakerhansen.com. And then I think all of my handles on social media are just my name, Sarah Baker Hansen. I'm most active on Instagram. Instagram's my favorite of the socials.
That's fair.
So yeah, I'm there, and I'm always posting on my Instagram story kind of about like where I'm at and what I'm doing, and trying out some new formats on Instagram. So if you go look at my Instagram, you'll see that the last couple of posts look a little bit different. So I've been trying something else. If you like it, like it. And on Instagram, I am fewer than 100 to 6,000 followers. So I might be doing something special for that 6,000th Instagram follower. I don't even know what it is yet. And this is the first time I've actually ever said that.
You're committed now.
Yeah, I have to do it now. But yeah. So yeah, I enjoy posting there, and like I said at the beginning, just incredibly lucky to still be on your show and be writing about food in Omaha.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with me, for coming to sit here again.
Thanks for asking.
Absolutely, and I am sure I will run into you at some type of food thing. Maybe
I hope
it's
so.
Dumpling Empire.
I hope it's Dumpling Empire. You need to get over there.
All right. So the chili pulled noodles and the soup dumplings. Except, thank you for the pro tip on making sure I don't burn my face
your
off.
mouth. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, Sarah Baker Hansen, and we will sign it off here in the studio. This is Dave with Saturday Omaha, and as we say, until we eat again, stay hungry. Bye.
Our show is recorded and produced by Saturday Omaha. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, as well as email SaturdayOmaha@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and stay hungry.
Saturday Omaha.
Eat this.